Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've got a story here sent to me by Bryce and David. Thank you very much. We've talked before about the notion of whether you can sue the government or not, or who in the government can you sue and under what circumstances. So can you sue a police officer? Well, it depends on what they did. The question here, though, is can you sue the DMV if they make an egregious mistake that harms you? Well, in this case, it's in Indiana, so it's the BMV. And the headline from IndianaCapitalChronicle.com is, Hoosier can't sue the BMV for damages related to an error by the agency. Nikki Kelly wrote this. But a man in Indiana says the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, the BMV, made a mistake which cost him a job opportunity, over $1,000 in fines, and a night in jail. But the Indiana Supreme Court says that he cannot sue for damages. So if he files the lawsuit, it'll get tossed. This case requires us to determine, this is the court speaking, whether the legislature intended to confer on Indiana's more than 4.5 million licensed drivers a right to sue the BMV when damages allegedly result from inaccurate records. So there's no question the record was inaccurate. He still loses. Though the legislature often enacts statutes imposing duties on private persons and government entities alike, we recognize a private right of action only when a statute was intended to create one. We will not infer such intent if a statute contains an independent enforcement mechanism or primarily protects the public at large. So keep in mind, and a lot of people are kind of surprised when they hear this, but the government has to give you permission to sue them. And so most states have passed laws that say, here's when you can sue us and for what. And the question is there such a statute in Indiana that speaks to the BMV? The ruling was written by the Supreme Court Chief Justice of the Indiana Supreme Court, said the General Assembly there created a material error review process to correct inaccurate driving records. And so if the legislature passed this law, well, what does it say? Well, it says there's a process to correct records, but it doesn't say, and you can sue for damages when they make mistakes. So here's what happened. A Marion County resident was pulled over in August of 2020 for 2 minor traffic infractions. And that's according to the lawsuit filed by this person. A Marion County prosecutor twice sent records to the BMV to delete his related conviction and restore his driving privileges around November of 2020 and February of 2021. Still, law enforcement pulled the person over multiple times, and the suspended license showed up on his record. It cost him a job, which he applied for as a salesperson. He reported paying more than $1,000 in tickets and at least 30 calls to the BMV alongside letters, emails, and going there and visiting in person. In the lawsuit, he wrote, the BMV breached the duty of care they are required to provide. This has caused the plaintiff to not be able to work in his industry since 2020. Plaintiff cannot work in this field due to negligence of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. So as summarized by his attorney, who told the Indiana Supreme Court in March that there is an implied right to sue in law. If there isn't, this man's got no remedy. But lawyers for the state urged dismissal of the case as a trial court judge had done earlier. So the guy filed his lawsuit. The trial court judge pitched it and said, you don't have the right to sue the BMV. The Indiana Court of Appeals had ruled that the man could sue the BMV. And I pointed this out before. Courts often disagree, and it's quite often on matters of just interpreting a law. And so trial court says you can't do it. Indiana Court of Appeals says, yes, you can, and reinstates his case. The state appeals that to the Supreme Court of Indiana, who says, no, you can't sue for that. You're out. So the court rulings of the legislature sometimes does create a private right of action to sue with very clear language, but that is not the situation here. We do not condone the BMV's alleged failings in this case, but as we have never recognized a common law duty in these circumstances, and the plaintiff has not established that one exists under the test that we use, we decline to find such a duty here. He has therefore failed to show He has a legally actionable common law negligence claim, the majority of justices ruled. So one justice wrote a dissenting opinion in which he said the statute does impose a duty on the BMV to maintain records for each individual licensed, suggesting it owes a duty to those individuals rather than the public in general. Despite repeated requests, the BMV failed to correct the error in this plaintiff's driving record. This failure foreseeably caused him harm, including a lost job opportunity. At this early stage, he has alleged sufficient facts for his negligence case to proceed. Now, I'm going to try to avoid getting too technically into the weeds on this one to mix metaphors. But it's not just a mixed metaphor, it's a butchered metaphor. But a negligence claim arises when one person owes another person some kind of duty, often a duty of care, and they breach that duty and it harms the other person. The best example is automobile negligence, okay? So someone's driving along and they do something careless while they're driving and they cause a car crash with somebody else and they hurt that person, okay? You have a duty to drive your car safely when you're driving your car out in public. And you owe that duty to other drivers on the road. And so when you breach that duty and it harms another person, they can sue you for negligence. Okay, that's the basic concept of negligence. So there has to be a duty first. And the first thing you look at is there a duty recognized in the law? And so the question here is, the DMV or the BMV, or in Michigan it's the Secretary of State's office, they do all this work. We know what they do, okay? They track driver licenses, license plates, registrations, things like that, okay? They handle large quantities of paperwork, but it's important paperwork because it's the stuff that allows you to drive your car on the road and all this stuff, and it's these things that you have to have for your day-to-day life. This person here said that they screwed up in such a way that their records are inaccurate, and the inaccurate records have caused them to get pulled over, caused them to get arrested, caused them to lose money, caused them to waste all kinds of time, and caused them to actually lose a job opportunity. So let's assume those facts are true. And by the way, the upper courts, the higher courts will do that for the purposes of argument. They'll say, okay, for these purposes, let's assume everything he says is true. Does the BMV in Indiana owe him a duty for which he can sue if the duty is breached? And they say no. They say no. And so it boils down to whether there's a duty at common law because of the fact that there is a statute that addresses what the BMV does and does not do. And it says specifically that here is what you must do as the BMV, and it lays out what they're supposed to do. And the argument is, well, they didn't do that. Well, you look at the statute and say, well, what does the statute say happens if they don't do their job right? And it doesn't actually include a remedy. It doesn't say it. So his argument is, well, it's a common law duty of just negligence. They owe me a duty. Aren't they duty bound to do their jobs? And the problem is that courts are supposed to look at legislation, the laws, and ask, in essence, what's the legislation supposed to accomplish? What's the legislature trying to do with this law? And obviously the legislature could have put in a private cause of action and said, yes, someone harmed by the failure of the BMV to do its job as outlined above can sue for damages and attorney fees and court costs. They often do that. But they didn't do that. They did not do that. And so did they intend for people to bring common law causes of action under negligence when they passed that law without including the section on private actions? And the court's saying, no, they did not. Now, here's the interesting thing about this case, is that the legislature in Indiana, if they want to, can fix this if they perceive that this is not correct. So they could look at this and go, oh, something that guy should have been allowed to sue, we can simply amend the statute and add in one section that says, and we intend to create a private cause of action here, which we didn't do previously, but yeah, we're doing this to correct the error from that one case. And that happens. That does happen. So I feel really badly for the guy. What a nightmare. And if you ever tried to deal with a government agency like, I don't know, the DMV or the IRS, or there's a few others over the phone, good luck. And we're talking about just writing off days on your calendar, not just minutes or hours. I mean, it's bad. So I feel really sorry for the guy. And quite frankly, I don't know how to feel about it in the sense that this is all happening in Indiana. I suspect that this is the case, though, in most states. And I don't know how many states would be out there that actually passed a statute that says, here's what the DMV must do. And if they don't do it, they can be sued by the people they've harmed. And that's what the law would have to say. So the law does not say that right now. This guy's case is done. And like I said, I feel for the guy. It sounds like a nightmare. But I have to tell you that Bryce and David sent this to me. And I literally went to turn my phone off. I was going to turn my phone off to shoot this video. And an email popped in from David who said, hey, Steve, have you seen this article yet? Just in under the wire, David. So Bryce and David sent this to me. It's published in the IndianaCapitalChronicle.com. Nikki Kelly wrote it. Hoosiers can't sue the BMV for damages related to agency errors. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. But I don't want to go outside. There's people out there.